Great. I think let's get started. So welcome everybody, and thanks for joining us today from wherever you're joining us, whether it's rain or shine or night or day, and thanks for being here with us today. This webinar, as you can see here on the screen, is about digital innovations in delivering social protection in rural areas, and with the lessons that are coming from that for public provisioning during the post-pandemic recovery and beyond. And it's based on a publication that you can already find. It's out. You can find it, of course, on socialprotection.org and on the FAO website, in which we invite you to read and we'll be sharing in the chat. We've got a very packed agenda, as always, with socialprotection.org. So that the session today will be focusing on kind of we're extracting some of the key learnings from this study that was conducted on the digitalization of social protection and how that has affected rural populations. And the key questions that we're going to be tackling are how can digitalization support the uptake and delivery of social protection in rural areas? What are the main challenges of using these digital tools? We know there are many, but obviously kind of a lot of good things have come out of it, and Beatriz will be speaking to that. And how can low and middle income countries overcome these challenges with or without digital tools to guarantee the social protection that we want to be seeing in rural areas? We're going to be following this session with this focus with a little kind of deep dive into the principles for digital development. So if we go to the next slide, we can just take a look at the overview of how the session is going to be organized. We're starting with this welcome and introduction. We'll have some opening remarks by Alejandro Greenspoon. We're then going to be looking into kind of digging deep into the main findings from the report, and Beatriz, who's the lead author on this, together with many other authors, will be presenting. And then we're going to have some really interesting country case studies coming from Anne C. and from Umut Kaya, joining us from Turkey and from the Philippines. And then this kind of separate short session on the digital development principles and how these are relevant to us in this context, followed by closing remarks. Sorry, I forgot about the Q&A. That's always a pretty crucial element of socialprotection.org webinars. So do start getting your questions ready and feel free to put them into the chat whenever those come to mind. If we go to the next slide, I'll just give you a bit of a deeper overview of who our speakers are, so you know who we have with us today. It's an amazing team as always. I'm Valentina Barca, and I'm acting as moderator today. Alejandro Greenspoon is a senior policy officer at FAO. He's been leading a lot of the digital social protection work for the social protection team, and he's been working at FAO for many years, and before that he was at UNICEF. Beatriz, we've said, is the lead author on this publication. She's been working on issues of digital social protection for some time now. She was kind of at the IPCIG, which is now the IPCID, and working with IPEA and FAO on issues of digital in rural areas. So I'm sure she'll be bringing a lot of depth to the discussion. It's nice to have you here, Beatriz. If we move to the next slide, we're very honored to have Umut Kaya with us, who's acting head of department for the Ministry of Family and Social Services in Turkey. He sits within the General Directorate of Social Assistance and in the Department of Monitoring, Evaluation and Performance. And he brings to us a lot of practical experience from kind of what Beatriz will be speaking about in more abstract terms. We'll get a good sense from Umut on how that translates on the ground in a country with a very advanced social information system. We'll then have a Philippines-focused presentation by Anne C., who is a project evaluation officer for the 4Ps Planning, Monitoring and Evaluation Division at the Department of Social Welfare and Development in the Philippines. And again, kind of a lot of rich discussion coming from Anne in terms of practical implementation at program level of digital innovations. Last but not least, we have Dominique Leska, who's an advisor for digital social protection at GIZ. He's going to be focusing on the digital development principles based on a publication by Madhumita Hebbar that has been published through GIZ. He has been involved in digital issues for social protection for a few years now. He's one of the lead forces behind the Digital Convergence Initiative, which I invite you to take a look at if you haven't already. Yeah, we're very happy to have this great team with us today. And with no further ado, I'm going to hand over to Alejandro for opening remarks. But before I do that, just very quickly, the last slide on kind of etiquette. And I'm sure if you've been watching socialprotection.org webinars, if we go to the next slide, you'll know that, yeah, to use the Q&A function kind of with the button over there. And obviously you can engage on social media via socialprotection.org and tagging socialprotection.org. So over to you, Alejandro.
Thank you so much, Valentina, and thank you all of you, the speakers, for being here. So good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending on where you are. I wish to welcome you all to this webinar, in which we will be presenting this publication on digital innovations in delivering social protection in rural areas, which we completed at the beginning of this year, jointly with the International Policy Center on for Inclusive Development. We have great speakers today, as Valentina just said, but let me use these opening remarks to explain why we chose this topic. So I think that it goes without saying that the advent of digital technologies has transformed our lives, and it has done so in dramatic ways, in multiple ways, in all walks of life. But let's just focus today on what digitalization has meant for social protection systems. So if we think of many quite typical social protection schemes in a developing country setting about 10 years ago, especially the way they operated in rural areas, what we see is a program that collects information on potential applicants and enrolls beneficiaries manually, that keeps information on beneficiaries often in handwritten records or at best in Excel files, that transports cash to a pay point into which people need to transport themselves from their location at a certain date to collect their payments in person and carry the cash back to their homes at their own risk. It is a system in which people from poor households need to apply in person for each individual program they may be entitled to, and each time they have to present the same or similar information and records to be considered for eligibility. A system in which every program collects its own information and there is no data warehouse that makes information critical to decision makers and implementers flow, nor a one-stop shop where applicants or beneficiaries can go to learn about existing programs, apply to them, or lodge a complaint. And it is also a system in which every time the minister or someone in the capital needs a report to learn about, say, operational progress or bottlenecks in a specific scheme, they have to ask those on the ground to compile the report, often by hand, and send it over first to the district, then the regional office, until it finally eventually reaches the minister. So this is how many programs operated in rural areas 10 years ago, and how many still continue to operate to this day. Now enter digitalization. Even before COVID-19, many countries had been adopting digital solutions to make social protection delivery more efficient. ICT expansion and penetration have certainly not been driven by the social protection sector per se. For example, mobile phone penetration and internet usage have expanded greatly in rural areas of Africa and other regions over the last decade. And this has indeed opened up great opportunities for leveraging these developments and use them in the social protection field for the sake of improving outreach, management, and delivery. So what happened is that with its lockdowns, restrictions on public gatherings, and the need to respond and expand social protection programs swiftly and widely, the COVID-19 crisis gave a big boost to the adoption of digital tools and solutions, even in countries that had been lagging behind. So in a sense, COVID-19 forced countries to leapfrog on the adoption of digital technologies for delivering social protection. There was simply no way around it. So what we wanted with this report, what we wanted to do was to document some of the innovations introduced in the digital field in relation to delivering social protection programs to rural populations, We wanted to present to the public and have a discussion about the many benefits that the adoption of digital tools is bringing to the delivery of social protection programs, both to the citizens and to implementers across all stages of the social protection delivery chain. And we didn't want it to be just an intellectual discussion, so the report, apart from presenting some key conceptual and policy issues, also features 8 case studies to illustrate practical applications of digital solutions introduced in recent years, both pre and post-COVID, and the lessons one can draw from their success as well as the challenges they've faced. So let me pause here and convey our gratitude to the government officials from Argentina, Cambodia, Jordan, Morocco, Philippines, Togo, Turkey, and Uganda, who served as key informants and generously share their experiences with us in order to flatten the learning curve for other countries and in the process enrich our report. Many thanks, and we'll hear today from 2 such experiences. If there is anything that the experience of COVID-19 demonstrated, is that countries with robust social protection systems were better able to respond to the challenges posed by the pandemic. They were able to reach more people, to cushion them from the effects of the shock, and to do so faster. But let me not spend time talking about the benefits of digitalizing social protection systems. The next presentation by Beatriz will go into this. One thing our publication has sought to highlight is that despite all its benefits, digital social protection is by no means an unmitigated blessing, not certainly when dealing with rural populations. The latest data from ITU show that despite the promises of digitalization, large gaps persist that affect rural women, youth, indigenous peoples, migrants, and other population groups most heavily. Globally, for example, nearly twice as many residents in urban areas were using the internet in 2022 as did residents in rural areas. The percentages were 82% in urban areas versus 45% in rural areas. In the least developed countries, 13% of the rural population have no mobile coverage, and another 13% are only covered by a 2G network. These are all data that come from the 2022 update of the ITU's facts and figures on measuring digital development. Moreover, only 60% of the rural population in developing countries have an account with a financial institution. In sub-Saharan Africa, 62% of unbanked adults are rural dwellers. And even when people do have an account, usage remains low, often as financial products and services continue to be primarily designed for the needs of urban customers. So what this means is that despite all the progress made in expanding digital tools, large numbers of people in rural areas still remain effectively excluded from the digital solutions and financial services they need to improve their resilience and livelihoods. Our next presentation will touch briefly on these issues, and there are also questions relating to data privacy and confidentiality, among many others, which our guest from GIZ will elaborate on. So there is clearly still a long way to go to make digital tools available and accessible to rural populations in developing countries, and one needs to be aware of the risks of reinforcing exclusion and existing disparities as a result of the digital divide, including the digital gender divide that is still present across the world. So the next presentations will touch also on these issues. All that remains for me to do, therefore, is to thank the International Policy Center for Inclusive Development for having partnered with us to produce this report, the socialprotection.org platform for hosting this webinar, the speakers for their time and insights, and you, the audience, for being here, and more importantly, for your help going forward in making sure that digitalization delivers on its promises for the many millions living in poverty around the world, and it does not instead drive a deeper wedge that might leave some lagging even further behind. I wish you all an enriching discussion, and many thanks. Over to you, Valentina. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Alejandro. I hope that has got your appetite going in terms of what you're expecting from this session. I think, yeah, the time is ripe to hand over to Beatriz to give us the first presentation. I'll try and be strict with timings. So it's 1:15 now. You have 10 minutes. Over to you, Beatriz, and the others can turn their videos off for now.
Great, thank you very much, Valentina and Alejandro, for the introductions. Let me see, I'm just going to share my screen. Let's see. Right, I believe you can all see it now.
Yes.
Great. As Valentina and Alejandro already explained, I'll be presenting this study conducted by the IPCIG in collaboration with the FAO. I believe some of the co-authors are here as well, Gabriela Peri, Cristal Varenga, and Basha Valle Parandir. Right, I believe Alejandro already did an amazing job at introducing the study and its context and what we already knew prior to getting into the research, so I'm not going to dive too much into it. But yes, I mean, we essentially tried to discuss the benefits and setbacks of using digital technologies for rural social protection, and for that we relied on 8 case studies. Namely, on one hand, we had 4 different case studies that essentially look at digital, like broader digital tools that can use for several programs within the social protection system, namely Argentina's National Family Farming Registry, the RENAF, Morocco's combination of the Al-Barid Bank and also mobile payments. Turkey's experience will be presented in more detail today. Here we studied the e-Devlet digital platform and the integrated social assistance service information system. And we also looked into the recently established national single registry in Uganda. Then we also looked at 4 social protection programs that, delivered social protection to rural areas and use a variety of different digital technologies and other types of ICTs to do so. Namely, in Cambodia, we looked at the COVID-19 cash transfer program. In Jordan, we studied the Takaful 2 program. In the Philippines, we focused on the social amelioration program, but also drew lessons from the 4 Ps, and we'll elaborate on that today. And in Togo, we studied the Novisi cash transfer program. Right, so there are some major findings that we could draw from the lessons of multiple countries. So these are the ones that I will focus on today, but I'm happy to expand on the examples and also on more specific country findings during the Q&A. Right, so one key aspect that we found that was very important for rural social protection programs to adequately use ICTs for catering to rural populations was the combination and the usage of non-internet ICTs, that is, those technologies that are still digital, but they don't require internet connectivity. But also, just acknowledging that there are limits to how much digitalization can actually be useful, and then still using analog options when necessary, rather than just trying to use innovation for innovation's sake. And using this combination of different technologies and tools throughout the entire process of social protection delivery and uptake. So some examples include, for example, how Argentina, Jordan, and the Philippines use different methods when reaching out to rural populations and registering them into social protection programs and systems. In Cambodia, similarly, data collection was also done through offline tools, and in Uganda, they also sometimes even use hard copies in areas where it was not feasible to use digital technology. And similarly, in Morocco, Jordan, and Togo, mobile payments were used that relied on 2G phones rather than smartphones, which benefited from a wider 2G coverage rather than a relatively narrow internet coverage, depending on the area. Then another key aspect to consider when using digital tools for rural social protection is that communities in remote rural areas tend to be they tend to be especially vulnerable due to histories of marginalization. They have a history of being excluded from public services, and at times even have relatively hostile history with the state based on past experiences. So it's important to raise awareness among these populations, not just about social protection programs, but also about the digital social protection tools that are being used in order to create, trust in the reliability of these tools, and motivation to use them. So in Argentina, for example, when registering people into the VNF, the outreach actors would actually explain what the VNF even is to rural populations. And then similarly in Morocco as well, when they introduced the mobile payments, they actually did an outreach campaign where they tried to motivate people to actually use this payment mechanism. Another key takeaway was that support from local communities and local governments can actually be quite useful for the implementation of digital social protection in rural areas. Although that, of course, depends on the capacities among these communities and local government units to actually use those tools, both in terms of human resources and also material resources. So in Argentina, for example, the outreach and intake for the VNF actually builds on a collaboration with farmer organizations. And in Cambodia, local communes and rural areas actually played a key role for data gathering and verification, and even for peer support when some community members didn't really know how to use the digital tools used in this process. And then along the lines of what I've mentioned just now, it's obviously very important to acknowledge that there are vulnerable populations within rural communities that cannot independently use ICTs, either because they can't afford them, or maybe they just don't understand how to use them, or don't trust them. So Jordan and Togo actually brought very interesting experiences where they acknowledge that perhaps within a household there might be someone who has, let's say, a mobile phone, or maybe the grandkids know how to use a certain digital tool, whereas their grandparents don't. So the programs implemented there took that into account and allowed people to share devices. Although, of course, this is an interesting solution, perhaps in the while we still deal with a digital divide, but at the same time, the extent to which it's useful is actually mediated by, inequalities within households and communities that might, undermine the benefits from this. And of course, we need to acknowledge that digitalization is not going to be a silver bullet, and we need other structural policies to ensure that digital tools can actually be used for improving social protection performance in rural areas. And here we found some very interesting examples from Togo and Jordan, where regulations and other efforts were put in place to expand digital infrastructure at the same time as digital tools were used for rural social protection. So in Togo, for example, the government put some effort into expanding 2G coverage, whereas in Jordan, the effort was made to make sure that mobile money agents actually expanded their services into rural areas. But obviously, there are some major challenges, and this slide is just a very, very brief summary of the common challenges that we identified. So as it was to be expected, there is a lack of connectivity still in rural and remote areas. People don't have an easy access to functioning ICTs. People also lack digital literacy. But what is crucial here is to keep in mind that that's not just a problem among poor and vulnerable individuals who live in rural areas, but also even among the government officials and other implementing actors that have to use ICTs for managing and implementing social protection programs. Then related to this, this digital divide in rural areas and between rural areas and urban areas can lead to major disparities in information access, especially, you know, if you consider other historical vulnerabilities that certain groups might face. Then other issues are related to the structures as a whole, not just, or like the structures that are necessary for digital tools to be functional for the use of, for social protection. So for example, a lot of vulnerable individuals in rural areas don't actually have national IDs, or for example, may often change their addresses depending on the country context. And that makes it really difficult to locate and identify these individuals, and that can have detrimental consequences for otherwise amazing tools like integrated registries, for example. Then even when ICTs can be used, we need to acknowledge that they're never neutral. They're, as much as governments put efforts into using objectively designed digital tools, we need to keep in mind that people design these tools. So ICTs are still constrained by existing social protection structures and other political matters that determine how they are designed and also how they are used for social protection, meaning that groups that are already excluded can still be excluded even when ICTs are used. And also related to this issue of wider structures, some issues, for example, like lack of financial inclusion, sure, they can be mitigated by using, for example, mobile payments and such, but issues related to basic infrastructure are not going to be fixed necessarily just by using digital technologies. So it's still necessary to acknowledge that social norms are sometimes at play that prevent individuals from accessing bank accounts, for example. Or other digital tools that can otherwise be useful for rural social protection. And related to this, you know, often because of a lack of basic infrastructure, rural areas still lack wider digital ecosystems that allow digital tools to actually be useful. And some tools, especially when they're designed maybe during a crisis response or in a hurry, they still might have some design issues and might, thanks Valentina, and might still, for example, crash if a lot of people use them. Yes. And just quickly, here's some policy recommendations. Obviously, we have a lot more in the actual report, but we found that it's necessary to establish, you know, the basic conditions for ICT usage in rural areas first before they can actually be useful for social protection. So for example, governments must invest in basic and digital infrastructure, the expansion of national identification systems, financial inclusion, as well as basic and digital literacy. Then it's also key that implementing actors actually have the capacity to use digital social protection tools, including in terms of material and human resources. And what is also central is, again, to not innovate just for innovation's sake. So while the two above, the two recommendations above are being implemented, we just need to acknowledge that some rural areas were just not ready for the usage of certain digital tools for social protection. So it's better to just use the combination of simpler tools while the other necessary investments are being made. So yes, thank you very much for attending this webinar and for listening to this presentation. You can download the report and the one-pager summarizing it both on the IPCIG website, the old website basically, and on the FAO website. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Beatrice. That was tough to run through so much. And the report is dense and it's full of insights, and I love that it's very full of country examples. So if you want to hear more of those beyond Philippines and Turkey that we'll be listening to, do take a look at the report as well. But right, I think we're ready to hear from one of our two country examples. So Umut, please do come. So you're joining us from Turkey and the Ministry of Family and Social Services, as we said, and over to you.
Hello, everyone. Can you see my screen? Hello.
Yes, yes, we can. Thanks.
Thank you for the feedback. Okay. For the last 30 months, I question myself about what is the meaning of social protection as a result of serious earthquakes in our country. You might know that. Because I think most of the country are managing social protection in the peaceful times, but after crisis, the story is totally different. So being ready for the next crisis is very important, and mostly is about integrating information systems, making social protection digitalized, and I will share our country's experience about this issue. I believe in principle of proportionality, so I will give some information about country, because if you have a big country, then it is not that easy to manage social protection in the peaceful times, which is a contradictory, which I said before. Turkey is a big country; its population is over 85 million, and we are middle and upper middle income country. In our country, registered refugee number is over 5 million, which is, I believe, more than many countries' population. And also, geographically, the square kilometer of Turkey is something like 800,000 kilometers square. So how we use our system and manage this number of people in need? It is mostly about integrated socialist information system, which is mostly based off a single and unique registry identification number. In Turkey, if you are a citizen, you have 11-digit identity number, and as a result of this, you can cross-check your relevant data from various institutional web-based services. Nowadays, our system is, talking to other systems. Number of institution is 29, and 120 web-based services. We can gather information about the socioeconomic background of our, appliers. It is not an easy road. For the first days and years, we encourage other public institutions to create their own web-based services. We, actually give some servers and, every possible encouragement tools for creating their web-based services. As a result, we can gather most of the relevant data about socioeconomic background of the people. As a result of this, in our country, standard integrated and converted system, which is previously paper-based, we can, I will talk later about this issue. The social protection and social assistance is something like that. It's not all about digitalization. Also, 103 social assistance and solidarity foundations, which are all around our country, and 10,000 employees, social assistance, servants are working about social assistances. In Turkey, there is a combination of integrated systems, digital solutions, and the people who are very experienced in social protection area. You can't only rely on digitalization, or you can't only rely on human factor, because after a big earthquake, there is no digitalization, right? There is no electricity, there is no computer, there is no nothing. All you depend on people. After some time, if you have a system of digitalized social protection, then you can manage that. Nowadays, it is like 19 million households and 50 million students' data are stored in the system. Not all of them are active, some of them passive, but some of them are active social assistance beneficiaries. The system are talking other institutions. I mentioned that other institutions, web-based systems, you can see all of them. For example, number 14, Ministry of National Defense, you can gather who is nowadays serving in the army or not, which is a related one of our social assistance programs. Social assistance for the families of servers and personnel. For example, you can get data from General Directorate of Child Services, number 3, which are the children are especially in need of protection and social assistance. In every in the lists, every institutions have a part of our social assistance programs. And the other thing, human factor, I said social assistance and solidarity foundations, the human factor. The board of trustees of the social assistance and solidarity foundations are these. The board of trustees ultimately decide who are the beneficiaries of the programs or not, but of course always checking mechanisms and some conditions to be the beneficiaries of the programs, each program, which are all stored in the integrated social assistance system, bütünleşik in Turkish we say. For example, you decided somehow this guy's being a beneficiary of this program, which this guy happened to be dead, then it's not possible to select this guy to be beneficiaries of this program, because ISAS don't ISAS prevent that with the relevant data I mentioned before. And district mufti, muhtar of the village, and your representatives are a very important part of this board of trustee, which are ultimately have to know the socioeconomic background of the district and each family, and they are know what are they dealing about. These are the programs. You see lots of them nowadays. Please don't count it. It is like 54 of them right now, which, by the way, are all possible as a result of ISAS. You can manage every process of each social assistance programs, application, decision, beneficial decision, payments on ISAS. And creating a new program, which I was part of creating 6 of them, is a result of using ISAS. It is such an easy task, not that easy, but easy task relatively by using these programs. For example, in 2020, we create pandemic social assistance phases. You can see social support program for epidemic phase 1, which over 2 million households payment is what was created, is about like 1 hour or so. The process is something like that. You can, apply for the social assistance programs.
Just quickly, Umut, you have another 3 minutes. Okay, sorry, just thanks.
Yeah, time is relative. Yeah. This is a snapshot of our program. it's not about gathering data from digital sources. It's also household visits is very important, and you can also store the data gathered from household visits on the ISAS program. This is the process. As a result of this, we can use verified means testing with the use of ISAS and household visits and human factor. You can see the process of social assistance. Yeah. So I am cutting the case. In Turkey, we use nowadays application from e-government, which is as a result of over 94% of internet access. You can see the numbers of applications. It is like 11 million social assistance applications via e-government. We also use other more traditional application systems. You can't, you don't have to travel to SSF, which is a cost for you. We managed that with the effective use of data of ISAS public institutions. We can ready for the next crisis. We also, in the next few days, integration of tablet users within ISAS. It's over 10,000 tablets will be delivered to SSF developers. Yeah, we see very good results after the earthquakes, and it is still hard, some challenges, because it is hard to define what is rural or not. I believe it might be similar in your country too, and some rural areas are harder to reach regularly. We have an option for payment at home, but it is still a very long distance, and for us lucky, there are not many people living in the rural areas in Turkey. So it might be an issue also, limited access to internet. Yeah, this is the end of my presentation. Maybe we can wrap up in the question, then asking questions,
Yes, I'm feeling guilty now. I rushed you on
No.
those important slides.
You just do your job, which is always a good thing, right?
Well, I'm sure we can come back to that during the Q&A. And again, I'm inviting the audience, if you do have any questions, if you have any doubts, do put those in the Q&A chat, and I'll be able to pose those to our panelists. I really wanted to appreciate one thing that you mentioned is how you've invested kind of at the same time in the digital infrastructure, but also the human infrastructure and the local capacity. So I think, this is something crucial that we need to be looking at and learning from Turkey. It's not just you invest in digital and you've removed your human capacity. It's almost the opposite. In fact, kind of we need that presence at local level to be supporting citizens in accessing, and the digital kind of backbone is supporting in that process. We'll come back to this, but I just really wanted to highlight, I think it's such an important point. Great, so we can shift to Philippines. Ansi, over to you. Thanks, and you have 12 minutes, and I'll be strict as you've seen. Thanks.
Hi, thank you, Valentina. Can I share my screen? Okay. So good morning, afternoon, and evening to all participants gathered here today. And I would like to acknowledge as well my colleagues who joined us today, especially Mr. Lloyd Fulo, who handled the SAP Bayanihan 2 implementation and who joined me during the interview for this study. And before I proceed, I would like to congratulate the research team behind the published study report. It is a well-written and comprehensive report showcasing digital innovations both at the system level and program level among the 8 countries studied, and appreciate the invitation to share our insights to the study as well as our experiences in the Philippines as we move forward in digitizing the provision of social protection programs to our stakeholders, like the social amelioration program, which I became part of. So going to the study. I would like to stress the importance and great role of digitalization plays as we shift our programs in becoming adaptive and strong responsive social protection, knowing that the Philippines is one of the identified most disaster-prone countries. And during the onset of the pandemic, the president issued a proclamation declaring a state of public health emergency throughout the country due to the threat of the COVID-19. The Department of Social Welfare and Development has been mandated to implement social amelioration measures. And thereby, the Social Amelioration Program, Emergency Subsidy Program, or SAP-ESP, under Bayanihan 1 and Bayanihan 2, law was implemented for affected poor and low-income households, Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino Program beneficiaries, households, and non-for-peace families as well. And the SAP-ESP subsidy amounted from a minimum of 5,000 pesos to a maximum of 8,000 pesos a month for 2 months. And our strategy for the implementation of the SAP emergency subsidy involves maximizing the existing infrastructure or by piggybacking with the Pantawid Pamilyang Pilipino Program or 4Ps, the National Poverty Reduction Program, and a Human Capital Investment Program of the country that provides conditional cash transfers to poor households to improve the health, nutrition, and education aspects of their lives. And with 4Ps pre-existing database or information system called Pantawid Pamilya Information System or PPIS, we were able to realize efficient and effective delivery of the cash grants to our beneficiaries. It helped in saving time, identifying the target beneficiaries as the system consists of the profile of our current 4Ps beneficiaries and other personal information which are useful in identifying and grouping them according to their status and needs. It is accessible by a program monitors up to the provincial level, and we also refer to PPIS when generating our payroll as their compliance records determine the value of cash grants they will be able to receive. And this information system covers both the urban and rural areas as long as there is a 4Ps beneficiary. The PPIS also help us avoid having duplication issues in provision of SAP as these beneficiaries were already validated. And the 4Ps also already have its own payment scheme wherein 4Ps beneficiaries receive their cash grants through a cash cards, which are now upgraded into a transactional account. This is done in partnership with the Philippine Government Bank, the Land Bank, and we were able to utilize these accounts and provided the SAP grants through their cash cards on top of their regular cash grants being received in 4Ps. This led for the 4Ps beneficiaries of over 3.7 million cash card holders to be the very first recipients of the SAP emergency subsidy first tranche and released in just 3 days. And although we have yet to achieve 100% cash card mode of payment, as of based on our data as of December 2022, 94% of the total active households received their cash grants through cash cards, while remaining 5% are through over the counter. This means that some of our households receive their cash grants through direct disbursement from our special disbursing officers. This scheme is more rampant in rural areas as there are limited ATM machines and some households are yet to receive their cards due to missing personal documents or lacking requirements that needed by the bank. And there's no difference in the distribution among urban or rural beneficiaries. If beneficiaries have available cash cards, they will receive it through it, but if not, we will proceed with our non-cash card distribution method where our special disbursing officers visit the identified area of the beneficiaries and distribute their cash grants on the spot. It is one of the ways 4Ps exerted effort in delivering the subsidies to its beneficiaries. And another benefit is that since the 4Ps also has existing platforms or social media channels, information dissemination about SAP emergency subsidy distribution was also done. Information officers created advocacy materials for information dissemination on SAP and utilize social media platform as a community communication strategy. Although its reach is limited to those who have access to the internet and have mobile phones, information dissemination among those hard-reach areas was drawn to the city municipal links or the parent leaders of the 4Ps. So it's another strategy that we have done to reach and inform the far-flung areas. And the 4Ps also have various channels for grievances. Beneficiaries could communicate their concerns and issues via text messages, caller hotline, or send snail mail messages to social media accounts, direct email, and among others. And this was also used during the distribution of TAP. And basically, grievances, particularly in rural areas, may gather through SMS, phone calls, or social media platforms as well. In case of unavailability of internet or telco providers, like in far-flung areas, the Family Development Session, or FDS, of the 4Ps, a series of meetings in the field by the field staff or case management are utilized to gather grievances. So to share, these are some examples of our informative materials that our information officers have produced and shared on social media channels. So we have updates on how many were already paid, and there are also sharing some comments or feedback from our beneficiaries. So although our strategy worked, there were still challenges encountered. So first is that the available data in the Pantawid Pamilya Information System is not updated real time, as there is an existing business process for updating. So submission of updates among beneficiaries has to be validated and approved at the regional level before it will be reflected in the information system itself. And as there are households who transferred residence and provided an update, but their information is yet to be validated and approved, it was not reflected in the system during the generation of data for the target setting. And this led to the issue on having mismatch on the target set. And fortunately, a guideline was put in place to resolve such cases. And in this reason why I agree with the suggested measures mentioned in the study, which is to conduct frequently collection of data and invest in strong digital infrastructure. Currently, the Philippines is building on the establishment of our national ID system, what we call the Philippines Identification System, or PhilSys, for which low-income household will be prioritized. And another challenge is the dissemination of information to far-flung barangays, especially beneficiaries residing in areas with no means of communication. So there are still areas in the Philippines with none to limited data signal or internet connection, which made it difficult to raise awareness regarding this TAP program. And thus, I agree with the study's recommendation that multiple types of active outreach and awareness raising activities must be put in place, especially in rural areas where people have little to no access to social and digital services. Another challenge that I also consider is that some households became confused on the source of the amount of grant that they have received through their cash cards. Some beneficiaries thought that it was an additional amount from their 4Ps compliance and not an additional grant as an emergency subsidy under the social amelioration program, which led them to think that they haven't received any SAP grants, and they resorted to reporting it as a grievance. It was eventually clarified during the process of resolving grievances, however, and hence this entails the need for a wider and better information dissemination about the program, including the process of its delivery, and so to minimize the number of possible grievances we could receive. And another challenge also is that we received reports on duplicate receipt of SAP grants of some 4Ps beneficiaries. Other members of their household were identified by the local government unit as recipient of SAP grants, being a non-4Ps beneficiary. Although local government units were provided with the list of 4Ps beneficiaries that they have to exclude, household members of the 4Ps beneficiaries may not be informed about the receipt of SAP grants of the 4Ps grantee itself. So hence the confusion and duplication of subsidy. And this could also be linked with the issue on being uninformed that the SAP grants were already included in the grants transferred in their cash grants. So this issue resulted for the program to need to identify these households with duplicate or multiple STAP grants and to process the return of excess STAP grants, which is an added workload and could have been avoided with strong information dissemination. So to highlight some points, shock response in social protection doesn't need to start from scratch, but could make use of yes. So thank you, Valentina, for the reminder. And so just to highlight some points, and shock response in social protection doesn't need to start from scratch, but could make use of existing program infrastructure with established system and guidelines. So sometimes we just need to look into our existing programs and improve its process to develop new ones and gather additional information from the best practices, may it be in the national or local setting or even in the international. And it is important to have a beneficiary database that is regularly updated or with real-time updates that covers all the needed information of the target beneficiaries. A success of a program heavily relies on good database as it affects one, our targeting, second, our distribution, third, our monitoring and our reporting. And having a database with right profiling could also open opportunities for our beneficiaries to receive services right for their needs and possible endorsement to other programs. Also, as we move towards digitizing our programs, we must also consider putting data protection measures to secure the data being handled in this program. It is part of our responsibility to safeguard and protect the data of our beneficiaries from possible data harm, hacking, and stealing information, especially that we handle big-scale data. And social protection program will benefit from partnering also with banks and those financial service providers for efficient transfer of grants and swift liquidation are already checked on the accounting side. May I also add that as we also improve and made progress in our mode of transfer, we must also look into increasing the financial literacy of our constituents, ensuring that they are able to understand the developments that they are involved in. Another is to maximize available communication platforms to disseminate information and utilize it as grievance channels as well to resolve any issues on the ground. And this doesn't only revolve around the social media platforms, text messenger or emailing or printed, but also in-person messaging, especially among those residing in far-flung areas. The continued support of and close coordination with the local government and other stakeholders of the program is also a must. And social protection in itself is elevating a social concern that relies not only on the government, but also on the strength of the support of the community and other stakeholders. And social protection program can assure that no one gets left behind by placing different measures for different situations. So during these unpredictable times, it is always advisable to conduct anticipatory action planning and identify possible scenarios that may arise to provide early solutions and mitigate possible risks. So that's all that I could share. Thank you for listening.
Thank you so much.
I hope I make it on time.
You were fantastic. You were fantastic. And you managed to say a lot in the time that you had allocated. And again, fascinating how you built on an existing information system for a new program, how sometimes, the importance of the data to be informing new programming, which Umut had also referenced, kind of the creation of new programs hinging on the ISAS system in Turkey and similar for your social amelioration program in the Philippines. And you banged quite a bit on the importance of the communication, once again, that last mile presence and kind of being able to interact with beneficiaries despite the digitalization. So really interesting, and thanks for that. I'm gonna pass over to Dominique, because despite everyone broadly keeping time, we are behind time, of course, somehow. So Domi, over to you for this last presentation, which will take a step back and talk through the digital development principles and how they apply to social protection. Over to you. And in the meanwhile, I invite, once again, I see one question, kind of a question starting to appear, but do keep on adding questions and we'll try and address them in the last 20 minutes before the end of the webinar. Over to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Valentina. And yes, let's go a step back and go a little bit more general, how to ensure the good effects of digitalization and social protection. So as we heard here, the potential of digital social protection system is huge, but pitfalls of limited administrative capacity, weak infrastructure, digital inequality, and inadequate data protection laws can lead to greater exclusion, especially among already vulnerable groups and in rural areas. So the principles for digital development endorsed by over 280 organizations worldwide and already provide a robust benchmark and understanding of standards for high quality digital development. And recognizing this, we, the SPIAC-B working group on digital social protection, together with the FAO, GIZ, World Bank, ILO, ADB, and a lot of other stakeholders have sought to use existing principles for digitalization to build a consensus on digital social protection systems. And we choose the principles for digital development as a starting point. But digital social protection requires specific sectoral considerations and differs in scope, time horizon, and complexity from other applications. So our guidance document highlights strategic priorities like evidence building and knowledge sharing. And today we will focus on 4 principles: design with the user, understanding the existing ecosystem, reuse and improve, use open standards and open source software. And as an addition, we formulated a few more social protection specific. The first one we will highlight here is design with the user. So in each phase of a project lifecycle, it's crucial to involve a variety of user and stakeholders. The ultimate aim is to enhance the user's existing processes, whereby saving time, using fewer resources, and improving quality. The understanding of user characteristics, needs, and challenges is fundamental to successful digital innovatives, and get to know user through conversations, observation, and co-creation. The information gathered through these interactions should guide the building, testing, and redesigning of tools until they effectively meet user needs. So the principle is to design with users, not for them. That means this approach is better address context, culture, behaviors, and expectations. The partnership with users should extend through the project's lifecycle, co-creation solutions, and continuously gathering and incorporating feedback. How can we design with the user into social protection? So there are 2 primary categories direct users in digital social protection solutions. At first, the beneficiaries, and second, the internal administrative user. So it's essential to design with the intended beneficiary in mind to improve access and prevent the risks of increased exclusion. The effect of becoming more digital depends on whether the people we're aiming to help can easily get and use digital technologies. Digital social protection is not just about giving services online. It's also changes the way things are done inside the organization and how governments and citizens interact. So however, we can't be sure that things will always be more efficient. This depends on a design process that thinks about different kinds of users to make sure they will keep using the service. The goal and needs of the people we want to help and the people doing the admin work can be very different. This means we need strong leaders to make good design decisions. How can we bring that into use or into practice? So incorporate all potential users in the interaction with a digital solution early on to prevent resistance in later stages. Clearly understanding user needs and setting accurate expectation about what the technology can and cannot do is essential to avoid mismatches between objectives and stakeholders. It's crucial to include marginalized groups in the design process, ensuring inclusiveness and leaving no one behind. The design of digital solution should align with social cultural norms, values, taking into account local contexts. Use agile methods like rapid prototyping, testing, and feedback, which allow adaptation to dynamic multi-stakeholder environments and to avoid pitfalls in linear approaches. Get ongoing feedback from users and not only at the initial deployment stage. So the whole process, you need feedback. The second principle is understanding the existing ecosystem, and recognizing local structures and needs is crucial for designing effective initiatives and digital tools. This requires a deep understanding of the unique condition in each country, region, and community. Allocating time and resources to ecosystem analysis is crucial to ensure the selected technology tools are relevant, suitable, and non-duplicative. This analysis will provide insights into the context or ecosystem where the work is being executed. Ecosystems are defined by multiple factors such as cultural, gender norms, political environments, economy, technology, infrastructure, and others. These factors can have a huge impact for individual possibility to utilize a technology or participate in an initiative or a program. So ignoring ecosystem challenges can pose risks. Initiatives that fail to consider these challenges are less likely to achieve their objectives, scale effectively, and may lead to unforeseen consequences. For social protection means that to fully leverage digital technologies, it's necessary to have a strong analog foundation. These include legal and policy frameworks, robust political and administrative institutions, access to affordable technologies, and appropriate skills. It's crucial to understand the interplay between the technology and the ecosystem. Despite their promise, digital technologies alone can resolve deep-seated issues like weak rule and law, governance deficits, and poor accountability. In some cases, they might accidentally make these problems worse. Experts often find these principles fundamentally in theory, but challenging in practice. Given the broad range of topics covered by this principle, a standardized assessment tool like the ISA guidelines could be a good benefit. Understanding the broader e-governance context is crucial to avoid developing isolated systems and to ensure that digital social protection activities are built upon a wider e-government foundation. This includes assessing the presence of an overarching e-governance platform, governance commitment to a whole of government approach, a framework for ICT and interoperability, and suitable legal and regulatory provisions. Assessing infrastructure availability, affordability, and accessibility is crucial, especially since vulnerable and marginalized groups are often face digital exclusion. It's important to understand the digital divide impact on these groups, despite advantages in digitalizing beneficiary experiences. Understanding the technology and skill related to ICT is important. This is because managing the people needed for digital social protection can be tough. It's crucial to think about the current government technology projects, the IT ability within the social protection agency, and possible partnerships with local institutions and companies. Understanding opportunities and constraints around interoperability is important for the efficiency and effectiveness of social protection systems. It's also important to consider who might be excluded by data integration approaches. Recognizing these, the implication of the political climate is crucial, as major reforms, especially ICT-enabled ones, require a long-term horizon and a supportive broad and political context. The principle of reuse encourages the identification of existing technology solutions, data, and frameworks utilized by your target population or within your sector. This approach advocates for modular, interoperable solutions over standalone ones. It promotes collaboration with other digital development practitioners to increase awareness of existing tools and foster relationships for future reuse and improvement. And secondly, the principle of open standards, open data, open source, and innovation plays a significant role as well. Defining and communicating the meaning of openness for your initiative is crucial. Adopt and build on existing standards that allow data sharing across various tools and systems. Leveraging existing open platforms to automate data sharing, connect your tool or system with others, and maintain flexibility to adapt to future needs. Considering investing in software as a public good, developing new code to be open source, and sharing on platforms like GitHub, Gitbook, etc. Combining these principles can effectively highlighting the use of open source solution providers in the social protection area. We use in digital social protection MyFOSS, Mojaloop, OpenMS, Core MIS, etc. And we have initiatives like the Digital Convergence Initiative for interoperability standards. And let me highlighting the last principle.
Give you one last minute, yeah.
Yeah, sorry. And let me highlight the social protection specific principles. And first, prioritize policy over technology. The role of digital technologies is to facilitate and optimize government policies, not to replace them. The technology should serve to effectively enact policy decisions, be it maximizing welfare and minimizing costs. The next one is understand the need for change. The third one is clearly established ownership and accountability. And lastly, effective change management is crucial. So this is, I think, the most important one, the change management between using digitalization and give the user the opportunity to use the digital technology. And if you're more interested in examples, we have on our website, spdci.org, reports on applying the digital principles for social protection on the website, and we can share it also later in the chat.
Fantastic.
Sorry for the time management.
No worries, it's always an issue. You practice at home and then it's different when you're in it. Great. So I'm going to invite all the panelists to come back to the screen with their videos on, and we're going to try and find some time for some questions. We've got kind of 15 minutes left before closing remarks. I'm going to actually take advantage of the fact that the last point that you mentioned was change management, to come to a question that was asked by the audience, and it's a question that goes principally to our country counterparts from the Philippines and from Turkey on do you feel that digitization and the fact that you're increasingly using digital tools along the delivery chain, do you feel that has changed the nature of the work and kind of the way in which social workers are working in, especially at local level? So for the social worker workforce, what types of changes have you seen in terms of their day jobs because of digitalization? So over to you for this first question.
Sorry, it was for me. I could hear.
Shall I repeat?
No, I got the question.
Yes, sorry.
Is for me, right?
Yes.
The question is for me, right?
Yes, for you and for Anne.
Okay, of course, it changed the way social workers do their job dramatically because they have lots of things to do. As I mentioned, 10,000 social workers are managing over 60 million people and nearly 20 million households, which is not possible by without ISAs. It kind of tool, it always is. It's a tool for doing their job properly because they constantly feed the system by entering information about the households, and you can improve as a result of the single households and the people in need in general. You know, I think it is the saying of Lord Kelvin: if you don't, content, you can, improve it. You know, right? So you find out the initial point of the beneficiary, and over time you can see the changes or not changes. So you can improve and change of your response to each and every possible case. I only see good things in using systems, but of course, if you all digitalize it, you can, it is very ironic. You see only the people in the system because you gather their data, but if you have no informal data of the people, you always consider that there's some other people, and most probably they are more in need, and you consider that. And you see these people by just looking there and going to households by social workers.
Great. And do you want to add something to that from your perspective?
Yes, and I think we are living in a fortunate time that we can already access the internet, and we almost everyone already has a mobile phone. For example, in our city municipal links, in our 4Ps and our parent leaders, they communicate with our beneficiaries via text messaging, and they provide updates, and they also submit reports to us, to the provincial level, up to the regional level, and up to the national level through the means of the internet. And when we have a meeting, we utilize these Zoom meetings and Google Workspace in that we have utilized in doing our work. So I think our social workers are able to maximize these digital tools, and it made their work more efficient and effective in delivering the services that we have.
Great. If I can add from some of the research and work that I've been doing on these topics, is some countries have acknowledging the fact that sometimes the introduction of digitalization has also changed the type of workload of social workers, sometimes kind of being forced to do a lot of data entry rather than the type of work, kind of the support and the case management work that obviously is their core role. And some countries have introduced some job differentiation in terms of actually introducing data entry clerks and sort of support to the IT side, so that the social workers had the time to be dedicating to the core of what they should be doing. But kind of obviously we haven't spoken about case management systems specifically, but these again are interoperable with the core social protection information systems and can also be of support to social workers. There's a great ethnography that came out from a MENA country, I can't remember, about the frustrations of a social worker in this digital landscape, which I can try and share later with participants. Does anyone else want to come in on that question, or shall I move to the next one? Anyone else want to, Beatrice? Okay, so let me move to the next question, which is to Umut. I know that you've answered it on the chat, but I think it'll be interesting for others to also listen to, just in terms of how does your process for registration, for intake, bringing people into your system work? And I think it's important for us to all hear it, because again, it showcases how you have a very strong digital system in the back, but at the front office, you actually have people kind of interacting with people and an on-demand application process. So if you could briefly speak to that.
Okay, briefly. In Turkey, over 60 million people are regularly using government systems. You can apply for social assistance from that. And after that, the system, it is like pre-assessment, some conditions, and according to your location where you live, then your application is sent through ISAS the responsible social assistance and solidarity foundation, and they see as an apply for social assistance, and they immediately process this application and determine with the board of trustee the applicant is a beneficiary or not from the relevant social assistance programs. It's something like that. And you can also track your application if you are an applicant, the stage of your application through the system. And maybe at some point you see, okay, I will be delivered this payment the next week or something like that. Yeah, it is mainly this, and you can store all this data in the ISAs, and also for example, the applicant asks SSS worker, what is my applicant situation, and he or she directly reply to this question. Next week you will get this payment also using ISAs.
Mm-hmm. So again, there's transparency on processes and sort of visibility for everyone. And I think the role of the board of trustees is also important, because it's not, obviously you have a very automated system and you're drawing data from other government databases, but you still have a sort of the board of trustees playing a role in terms of interpreting the digital decision. So again, that's another frustration that often caseworkers and people at local level have, the frustration if it's just the computer saying yes, computer saying no. But in your case, you have the board playing a role, which I think is very important to highlight. Okay, I'm going to shift to another question that has also been addressed on the Q&A, but I think it's useful to discuss openly, which is this around the network connectivity issues, the low level of literacy, and especially digital literacy. So even if you're literate, but then being able to use kind of certain, so if you could speak to, again, from the Philippines and Turkey perspective, how you're addressing this specifically, maybe starting from Anne.
Yes. On the issue of the network connectivity, it could be addressed by continuous building of a network infrastructure along these areas. And the government is expected to show support, or at least a lot of budget for these, or partner with the telco or internet providers through a private-public partnership that could provide a win-win solution for the both parties. While on the issue on the low level of literacy, we do not have other way but to teach our rural population about these innovations, and through various means such as in-person discussion, or like what we do with the 4Ps, we do family development sessions, and and I think it is important to include subjects in schools on the use of computers and how to access the internet. And we are fortunate that we have better access to internet now. We could access via our phones that we should also maximize, and I think that would better address the enhance the digitization of the social protection program. Right.
Umut, do you want to add anything?
I go ahead, Umut. Sorry.
Okay. People help each other, and people learn from them, other people. For example, a neighbor which is more advanced in using this digital technology can help for his neighbor or her neighbor to apply these social assistance programs. And also in Turkey, we use household system. It doesn't matter. Maybe the grandmother needs social assistance, but the grandson in the household, if he's over 18, can apply for the social assistance programs. Not just one people, but yeah, people help each other. How can I know that? Because I know the total number of households in a district, and I see also the number of applicants, and they are highly correlated.
Fantastic. And it goes back to the principle of knowing your ecosystem that Dominique was talking about, is sort of knowing where the challenges are. It's again, it's not digital, all not digital, not black or white. It's about understanding digital for whom, for what stage of the delivery chain, why, for whom it might not be ideal, for whom we might need kind of last mile support. Some countries like India have been introducing digital service centers to support people in accessing digital services, kind of including in remote areas, and kind of more generally, even countries like Estonia, which is considered sort of the most digital country in the world, they're still doing digital lessons for that 1%, which is being left out because of the digital system. So let's keep that in mind. I mean, we have 5 minutes till the end. Do we want to have one last question for Beatrice and Dominique, or shall we move to closing? Shall we, even though 5 minutes is a bit nasty, I think.
Go with that question.
No, I'd be curious from, I mean, Beatrice, kind of over the course of your research, and Domi in terms of the paper on the digital principles, if there was any kind of case study or any country example, again, that really jumps to mind beyond the Turkey and the Philippines that we've just discussed. Is there sort of in 1 minute, is there any other example that you'd really like to share that you think brings all of this to life in terms of access for rural populations, Beatrice, and more broadly for Dominique?
Well, I'm quite a fan of Argentina's RENAF, the Family Farming Registry, just because of how it's also embedded in the overall context of Argentina, right? So next to being a family farming registry, the way that the RENAF reaches out to register people, it not only works with family farming organizations, but it's also essentially taking the state to people in rural areas, right? So the implementation of the RENAF also advocates for the political role of family farming in Argentina. The outreach through working with family farming organizations also explains why people should register in the RENAF. So I think it also highlights how social protection and specific social protection tools are sort of included in the provision of public services as a whole. Also because the RENAF, it not only opens, it's not only an entry point for social protection, but also for other agriculture policies. So it also highlights how one tool can actually be used by multiple sectors in general.
Which is, again, crucial from that ecosystem perspective. It's not just about our social protection registry and database. It's about how we're linking to others, how we're working with financial service providers, et cetera, et cetera. Amazing. Thanks for doing that in 1 minute. Tough, but you did an amazing job of it. Domi, over to you.
Yeah, so maybe I can come back to the know your ecosystem and the IT literacy. So most of you know maybe the project in Cambodia, ID4, and the Ministry of Planning, GIZ and USAID created a new design called ID4, and to frequently update the social registry of poor households. And this replaced the resource-intensive census approach, which could only update data various over every 3 years. And the new design was tested in 19 communities using electric tablets for local data registration, and the feedback was collected and identified 2 main issues. Local governments struggled with electric systems and email accounts, and the delay of updating user programming via the new ID4 system. So the pilot project helped to identify these key improvements needed, such like IT training for local governments and better communication of updates. And these insights enabled now the nationwide expansion of the ID2 program and the emergency cash transfer during the COVID-19 crisis. And I think this is a good example for knowing your ecosystem better.
Design with your user,
yeah.
Evolve over time. Again, I mean, these systems, they're not the way we design them on day one. They're continuously evolving, and that was definitely the case also in the Philippines and Turkey. Over to you, Alejandro. I think if you want for a final conclusion, that's it on my side. Big thanks to all of the panelists, and yeah, thanks to the audience who stayed on till the end.
Many thanks to you, Valentina, and the speakers and the audience for the questions. So I'll just be very brief. We have 1 minute. I think that both the case of Turkey and the Philippines remind us that with every crisis also comes an opportunity. So in the case of Turkey, actually, among other things, they turned the challenge posed by the COVID-19 pandemic into an opportunity to start registering people who applied for social relief online. And at the same time, the case of Turkey, I think, highlights the importance of ESAS being at the core of a shock responsive social protection system, because it made it possible to expand programs both vertically and horizontally, and to introduce new schemes in response to the crisis and later the earthquake early this year. So I think it's important that these innovations were preserved after COVID and have led to an increase both in the efficiency and the coverage of social protection in rural areas. In the Philippines too, the government was able to leverage the digital infrastructure that had been set up to support the Pantawid 4Ps program in order to roll out the social amelioration program in response to COVID-19. So the SAP was able to piggyback on the existing beneficiary information system, on the payment and social marketing platforms, and on the grievance channels established for delivering the 4Ps conditional cash transfer programs. So we also heard from GIZ about the importance of creating a shared understanding of standards or good practices to guide the adoption and use of digital technologies, and the principles that Dominic shared are a step in this direction. He also reminded us about the need to adapt the principles based on a thorough understanding of the social protection sector and its challenges in each specific context. This in order to ensure that social protection initiatives are not only digitally sound, but also socially responsive, and that they embody principles of inclusivity, of equity, with a view to helping bridge the digital divide and reaching even the most remote and marginalized groups in rural areas. And along the same lines, Beatriz stressed also that because digitalization is no silver bullet, there is a need to continue to invest in basic infrastructure and in strengthening social protection systems. She also shared some of the actions that can be taken to minimize the risks of digital social protection in rural areas while leveraging the many benefits that it can deliver. So we are past the time for the webinar. So I want to leave it there and invite you all to look at the publication. There is a lot to learn from we heard 2 case studies today. There are 6 other case studies and also a number of lessons, both in terms of the benefits, but also the risks of digitalization in rural areas. So thank you so much to everyone involved, and have a great day. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Bye.